So I've been on a bit of a reading kick. I feel like this is very, very, very average, but every couple months I get into a reading kick. I find books that I love, I rediscover books around my house, I start reading, I'm having so much fun, and then I stop, and then several months to a year go by and I have not read anything at all. But lately I have been reading and I've been sticking to it, and I want to talk about the books that I read in July. If you're new to this channel, this is a completely different format. I don't normally do this. I'm an artist and I make vlogs sharing my art practice on here. And if you've seen the last couple of videos, you know I've talked about this ad nauseum. I am trying to move in a new direction with my work. And it is relevant to the books that I am picking out because I'm trying to use my reading to sort of supplement my art practice. I'm looking for books that have similar themes and subject matter to the works that I'm trying to make, and the sort of story that I am trying to tell with my work, which I don't really know what that is yet, so my list is pretty broad. So if you have any suggestions for me based off of the books that I share here, please comment them and let me know, because I'm kind of just, I find that I don't understand how people are finding books to read. I gotta be honest. I look at the New York Times bestseller list sometimes and I'm like, I don't really want to read a lot of these. And I don't know, I suppose I could ask friends, but I'm asking you. So I only read and finished 3 books this month, which is a lot for me considering I haven't been reading consistently in a while. But I do also want to talk about some of the books that I read and didn't finish and plan on finishing next month. Starting with books I did finish, we have Upstream by Mary Oliver. It is a collection of essays from Mary Oliver. I picked this book up last October, I think. A friend of mine had a reading at a bookshop in Atlanta and we went on the wrong day. While we were there, we were just like perusing, waiting for the reading that was not beginning that day to start. And I found exactly one Mary Oliver book. And I have seen a lot of Mary Oliver online, but I've never read a book of hers. And so I grabbed it. And I spent the next several months reading bits and pieces. It is really easy to just read like a chapter at a time, or an essay at a time, and it's very digestible. I really enjoyed this book. I love Mary Oliver. I love the way that she writes about human experiences and such, like, they're simple but in a very beautiful and kind of heart-wrenching way. And I love the way that she writes about and explores the relationship between humans and nature. But actually, my favorite essays in this book were not about any of those things. They were the essays that she did on Edgar Allan Poe and I think Walt Whitman. I really enjoyed those sections, and I don't know why. I don't read essays on authors often. I don't even read essays on artists often, though I'm beginning to think that I should, because there's something really nice about reading about a poet from the eyes of another poet. And it makes me want to read more books about artists on artists and authors on authors, and watch directors on directors and actors on actors. I want to read it again because, like I said, I was just picking this up and reading it bits and pieces over the course of several months, so I never really sunk into the book. It was just kind of like light reading for fun, and I feel like it could actually be really beneficial with some of the themes that I'm trying to explore in my paintings. The other book that I started and finished last month that I have a physical copy of is Painting Time by Melis de Kerangal. I picked this up from one of my favorite bookshops in New York called 192 Books. Last December we ended up in New York, we ended up at the bookstore, ended up like magical happenstance, and we were just looking around. I don't always get something when I go there, but I obviously saw the title Painting Time and thought, well, that sounds fascinating. It's about this young artist named Paula who attends a famous scene painting academy. I believe it's scene painting, or set painting. And she spends several months there learning how to replicate like very intricate marbles and woods. And so it follows her briefly during her time in school and then post-graduation, where she is trying to find her footing in the art world, trying to, you know, become a young independent woman. She's traveling all over Europe, picking up different set painting jobs, struggling to find a balance between work and life and work and play, and also how to make money and figure out what it is she actually wants to do after she gets out of school. This book took me so long to read because this author has never met a run-on sentence that she did not love. The blurb on the back of the book says, "This is writing that defies haste, that slows the eye." And that, like, is kind of an understatement. It took me so long to read this because it took me so long to parse through sentences and, like, figure out where we were going. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to read just one sentence to you. This is the beginning of a chapter. "They've told the others that they'll turn out this goddamn painting on the double, and that they'll whip it up fast, that frankly they don't give a shit about the diploma, and that all this has gone on long enough. But once they're at their stations, I know they slow down, take their time, as though the whole challenge of painting was to wring the last drop from these final nights, to sift through them in order to isolate each sensation, to hold on to each second, to gather up each atom, and soon these nights roll together into one single night, and the sentence begun between them on the first night has come to form one single sentence, shared, confident, one of those phrases where silence is never a rupture, but instead a continuity." I mean, they're beautiful sentences. I think this book is so beautifully written. There were a lot of negative reviews that I saw on Goodreads that were like, "Girl, like, stop using your words." But I found it fascinating. I especially love that this was from an artist's perspective, and the way that she describes painting in this book is so vivid. It like inspired me to get up and start painting. It made me want to get in the studio and paint. It made me want to start replicating various intricate kinds of woods. I do have another book by her that I picked up about a young chef that I'm very excited to read and will probably be reading within the next couple months. And the last book that I read and finished was an ebook called A Line Made by Walking by Sarah Baum. This book, it only took me about a week to read this book, but it felt like so long because I did not enjoy the main character. I love the book. I love the author's writing style. I love a really descriptive writer. I'm obviously very visual, so a book that's really descriptive and an author that's really descriptive really suits me. But the main character in this book was just kind of insufferable at pretty much all times. The book follows another young artist, another young woman who recently graduated art school, finds herself working a kind of shitty gallery job, and has a bit of an identity crisis and a mental breakdown. Her grandma passes away at the beginning of the book, and so she quits her job and moves out of her apartment in the city to live in her grandmother's house for the summer in the Irish countryside. And the book follows the entire summer where she basically just continues to have a mental breakdown. I do think that this book was a really great depiction of this very specific, very niche point in someone's life where they are just entering adulthood and don't know what to do and are finding themselves struggling without having the constraints of like parents or school or an actual job, and how you can start to lose yourself in those moments. It was a very real and honest depiction of depression to me, but regardless of her mental illness, the main character is just not very likable. And she's not meant to be. She makes racist remarks throughout the book, makes ableist remarks throughout the book, frankly makes sexist remarks throughout the book. And even though you're obviously rooting for her to find a sense of peace and, you know, begin to actually live her life, you just kind of feel like she's never going to, and you get kind of tired of it. My favorite part about this book was this sort of like self-regulating habit that the main character has where she will test herself on her art knowledge. Like, she'll hear something on the radio about grief and she'll test herself and go, okay, works about grief. And then she'll list a work about grief and go through it, describe the work, and describe her understanding of it. And that I found very interesting and very fun to read, and a really good insight into how the main character's mind worked, even if she wasn't aware of it herself. I almost gave this book like 1 to 2 stars because I really just wanted it to be over by the time I was about halfway through it. But by the time I got to the end, I felt like it had been worth it. A lot of reviews I read online said that they felt like the character made absolutely no progress by the end of the book, and I'm not entirely sure that I agree with that. But I will never reread the book, nor probably recommend it to anybody, so One of the books that I started reading but haven't finished yet, but plan on finishing in August, is called The Presence of Absence by Simon Van Boy. This is my first work of his. I found it on an app that I use to read ebooks and it sounded really interesting. And I do so far really like his writing style. It's a really short book that seems like it'll be pretty easy to get through, I just haven't had the time yet. But my understanding of it at this current point in time is that Simon Van Boy wrote this book based off of notes from another author that he made towards the end of his life as he was dying from, I think, terminal cancer. The author is completely anonymous. He passed the notes on to his wife, who passed them on to Simon Van Boy, and together they worked on creating this book that is sort of fiction but also sort of memoir based off of this unknown author's final moments on Earth. I don't really know how this ties into my body of work that I'm making, but I do think that it's a really interesting concept, and I'm interested to see how the story really explores those final moments of the author's life and how he grapples with the end of his life and leaving his art behind and leaving his family behind and what that feels like for him. I also started reading The Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is, I think, officially my first Virginia Woolf. I do think I read a little bit of Orlando at some point over the last couple of years, and so I started it, but as you can see, I've barely made any progress. I've never read Virginia Woolf before, and it takes some time adjusting to her writing style and the sort of language that she uses. Honestly, I don't really know what's going to happen in this book yet, but I am really interested to find out. And then an honorable mention, because I have been reading this book on and off for a while. It's just not something that I feel like I need to read all the way through, and I probably won't pick it up again for a while, but it is called Daily Rituals: How Artists Work by Mason Curry. I'm always really interested in routines and other artists' routines and how they work. I feel like there's a very stereotypical idea of how people should work and how early we should get up in the morning and what we should be doing to have, you know, productive, effective days. And this book really like smashes through a lot of those stereotypes. On the cover it has listed writers, composers, painters, choreographers, playwrights, poets, philosophers, sculptors, filmmakers, and scientists on how they create. Curry collected a lot of anecdotes about the routines of famous people you know and famous people you don't know, great thinkers, great artists, great creators of all times. And yeah, it's just interesting to see how different people set up their workloads, how different people work, how they get through their days, how they find their ideas, how their creativity sort of manifests throughout the day, and also how many drugs people have always been on. I forgot to say, I'm also reading Daikett. A lot of the reviews that I've seen for Daikett are really bad, but personally I'm really enjoying it at this point. Also, I think that a book that is called Daikett should automatically get 5 stars, just based off of the fact that it's called Daikett. The story is about 3 lesbian couples, 2 that are fairly young and 1 older couple that host the younger couples at their vacation home for the length of a vacation. And it's about these different queer identities and personalities coming together and meshing and not meshing and clashing and high tension and toxic relationships and secrets, and it's just really interesting. It's campy. I think it's really fun. I love everything about it. I don't know what there is not to love yet, but I'll let you know once I finish it. And yeah, those are all of the books that I read and finished and did not finish in July. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's very different from what I usually make, but I figured it's relevant because a lot of these books are going to be influencing my art in different ways. And if that's something that you're specifically interested in the next video, I could talk more about the ideas that I've sort of gotten from the books and how they're already influencing my work as I'm reading them. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye! If at any point you're wondering about the kind of weird setup that I have going on behind me, I set up a still life in my studio to paint from a couple weeks ago, and I have a video of the entire process up on my channel, and I will link it if you are so curious to go see it. Okay.